Hey there. Hello, hello, and welcome to today's live stream. And I'm just going to make sure that we are connected with our friends here on Instagram. Okay, now the gang is all here. And I'm so excited about today's hangout with you because, as you know, this is a time of year when we are all intending to make lots of positive changes in our lives. Maybe you have started doing this already, and maybe you have also been starting to feel some of that pretty predictable pushback, right? When one part of you desires to make perhaps some positive changes for good reasons, but there's this other part of you, or perhaps parts of you, that are getting in the way, maybe feeling a little bit obstructionist. I had this happen to me the other day. I have realized probably over the last year or so, it's important for me to get enough exercise. And over the last couple of months, over the holidays, I kind of got out of my regular routine and I was like, no, this week I'm getting back in there. And Tuesday morning, it was like 5 a.m. and man, I had to struggle a little bit. I was going like back and forth, like, do I really want to do this? I have all this stuff to do. There's this book I really want to read. I have all this work to do. Like, this could be a very productive time. And then this other part of me was like, no, get to the gym. You'll have so much more energy. You'll feel better. You know you need to do this, brain health, like all the things. But I was really feeling it, that tug of war between those two different parts of me. Who here can relate to this? Does anybody else know what I'm talking about? Or is it just me who struggles with this sort of thing? I hope I have some sympathetic friends here in this live stream today. That's okay. It might just be me. Maybe you guys have this all figured out. Anyone? I know there's a little bit of a delay here. So if anybody wants to chime in. No? Feeling shy? Okay. Well, but so anyway, so this is why, for a couple of reasons, I've released a couple of podcast episodes. Oh, we have one camper who would like to share. So thank you, Sirius, making me feel a little bit less alone in this historically. But you have a better approach now that works for you. I'm glad for that. And maybe over the course of our time together today, you can share your strategy with us, because I'm sure that our friends here would love to know more about that. But just super briefly, just wanted to put some, I think, pretty cool resources in front of you. So over the last couple of weeks, through the holidays, in anticipation of this transformational time of year coming out, I had the great opportunity to do what I thought were pretty interesting podcast interviews for Love, Happiness, and Success. I sat down with Thais Gibson a few weeks ago, and she had some very interesting insights on how to move things around in your subconscious mind that may be barriers to you being who you want to be and doing the things that you want to do. So check that out. It came out a couple of weeks ago. And then I had the most fascinating conversation with Dr. Richard Schwartz. He's actually the founder and thought leader behind internal family systems therapy. It's a kind of therapy that has increasingly, I would say, over in the last 5 or 10 years ago, really become more prominent and caught on. And at the core of his theory is this idea that we all have this really perfect part of ourselves, the central, healthy, whole part that is calm, it is confident, it is creative, it always knows what's best for us, but that we also have these other parts of ourselves, protective parts, perhaps wounded parts, or exiles, as he calls them, who can also serve really important purposes in our lives, but who we kind of need to make friends with, because if we don't, they can either go to war with each other, as the parts of myself did on Tuesday, or they can sometimes get in the way of our ability to be the kind of person that we really want to be, in that core central self. And so he just dropped so much fascinating information in our interview. And yeah, I was a little bit starstruck, in case you're wondering, because he's kind of a big deal. So that was amazing. And before we even start talking, I will share, I hope this doesn't show up backwards. No, here it is. He was telling me about a new book that he released, and I am not a paid spokesmodel at all. There's nothing like commission-y happening here, but he released an internal family systems workbook that I actually worked through myself in anticipation of this interview, to kind of like get visibility into the different parts. And I thought it was fantastic. So I just wanted to drop those resources in front of you. So those podcasts, the workbook, if any of you are experiencing some tug of war between those parts of yourself, and maybe you're feeling perhaps frustrated with some of those parts of yourself. And so we've taken a little time off from our live stream over the holidays. I hope everybody had a nice holiday season and a happy new year so far. But I am back in business and here today to visit with you and hear what's been going on with you, and maybe even answer some of your questions if you have anything coming up about how to get yourself into alignment with yourself. If there are parts of you that are feeling like there's a tug of war with each other, I'd love to hear about it so that we can talk about it. And today's going to be a shorter live stream. I have to hop off right at the bottom of the hour, but until then, I am all yours. And so I will wait to hear from you what we should talk about. Oh, here's a follow-up comment from our friend Sirius. Let me see if I can pull this up on my screen so that you guys can all see this, because this is kind of awesome. So at the beginning of our conversation, Sirius, you mentioned that you have developed a better approach to keeping yourself on track, like in alignment with that highest and best feeling part of you. And you shared that you wanted to start going to the gym again, but you didn't get any, let's see, it's hard to read over here. But you didn't put any rules or numbers for yourself. You told yourself that you would just see how many times that you would go, and that you've been going 3 or 4 times a week despite work and school. That's really wonderful. Okay, so let me ask you this. And I don't know, because it could also be like a personality thing. I mean, I think we all have differences and like just sort of the way we operate. But like, I hear you say that you sort of are leaving things open-ended with yourself, and you're like, oh, let's see how it goes. But somehow you're getting to the gym 3 or 4 days a week. And so I must know a little bit more about what kind of wizardry you are employing to make that happen, because I think if I use that strategy, I'd be sitting around reading books like all morning and in my comfy chair drinking coffee. So what are you doing? Are you a witch? That's okay. This is a safe space. You can tell us. I'll wait to hear your comment. I know, again, there's this really annoying delay, which is sort of hard to have a conversation, isn't it? And if any of you guys have other questions, jump in. Today, again, or if you're just joining, we're talking about how to stop fighting with yourself, how to get all of these different parts of yourself to work together in alignment to help you be the kind of person that you want to be. Yeah. So, okay. So that sounds like the key to what's working for you is that you don't like to feel pressured. You don't like to feel guilty, which, yeah, right. And so that when there's like an open-ended kind of thing that is actually working better for you, and that you used to feel that way when you put in hard numbers. That is so cool. Maybe what I'm hearing you say is like, well, I mean, if Dr. Schwartz were here, what he would say is that perhaps you had this like manager part of yourself that was like, okay, you have to go 4 times this week and you have to hit this objective and like kind of like tracking what you're doing in a way that makes this other part of you say, no, you cannot boss me around. I don't like this. You're not allowed to make me feel guilty or pressured. This other part is kind of like this resistance piece, and that those two parts of you are in opposition, and that when you recognized that, you excused the manager from this equation, and that there's this other intrinsic part of you that perhaps really enjoys exercising, and that it helps you feel good, and that once you kind of tone down that manager, you are able to be who you wanted to be. Now, I'm just making things up right now that may not have any bearing on your reality at all. But if we were looking to parts theory and internal family systems, that would be the concept. Does any of that resonate for you? Oh, and what a great point. There's a social cultural thing happening. The zeitgeist is people on social media trying to push rules, eating clean, perfect performance, which this other part of you, and I think a probably very healthy part of you, is like, no, I am not going to take that on as something that means, that I feel like I need to get into line with. So letting go of the manager and removing those influences. That is fantastic. And I think, this is a good conversation about I think an important aspect of this, which is that there is no one right way to have a better relationship with yourself. And that sometimes I think it really means setting boundaries with parts of yourself that that kind of central part of you, have become aware is not constructive. That there's like a negative reaction to this, and it's like you're going back into that healthy space to say, no, this is not helpful to me, and I need you, manager part, to kind of tone it down in order for that healthy part of me to just naturally be expressed. Now, I'll tell you personally, for me, and again, this is why I think, we're all different and these things need to be respected, is because I think when I am in a good place, I need to spend time trying to understand the different parts of myself and making space for all of them. And so for example, I really appreciate this manager part of myself. And in particular, I do really, really well when I can get into some kind of routine. So like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do a group fitness class. And it's just like kind of getting into that routine is the biggest part for me, because I'm not really naturally a routine person. But if it just turns into this habit, something that I do, that is like a really positive part of me, because it allows me to be who I really want to be. But I also need to make space for the other part of me that legitimately wants, needs, and deserves to feed my brain. Like, I'm a huge reader. I love learning new things. And I need to make space in that life for that in my life too, without feeling bad or guilty about it, because that is not bad or wrong, So it's like both of those things are true, but how do we honor both of those? Who else can relate? I'm going to check out some more comments here. And today, you guys, if you're just joining us, we are talking about how to stop fighting with yourself, that maybe you have different parts of you that can sometimes feel like they're at war a little bit. Like part of you wants to do one thing, another part of you doesn't. And so it can feel like sometimes frustrating if one part of you is kind of winning out over the other, because there needs to be balance, right? And so that's the topic of our conversation. Oh, well, hold on. One follow-up question. Do I feel guilty when you fall out of it, though, of my routines? No, I do not feel guilt at all. That is not part of my experience, but I will tell you what does happen to me that I've noticed is that if I fall out of some of my like health routines for too long, and it's not just exercise, it's getting enough sleep, it's the foods that I'm eating. If I fall out of those routines for more than 4 or 5 days, a better part of a week, I will physically begin feeling the consequences of that. I will start to feel tired. I won't sleep as well. I feel foggy, like mentally, compared to how I feel when I'm exercising and eating more nourishing foods. And so I will and do, go off over the holidays and go through periods where I'm like, I am on vacation and I am going to have wine and eat whatever I want and have a good time and all is well. But 6, 7 days later, I don't feel good. So I think that that's a natural motivator for me to try to help me do the things that I know are in my genuine best interests. But no, I don't feel guilty. I hope that answers your question. And if anybody else would like to chip in about their experiences, if there are parts that are, because see, here's the thing too. And to your point, Sirius, I think that our culture kind of wants us to prioritize certain parts over other parts, right? Like that health culture or the perfect culture that you referenced. It is saying this part of you is better than the other parts. There's like almost a supremacist orientation. And so I think when we look at parts theory, we could say that there is another part of, like me, for example, that actually just enjoys resting and eating cake and not, just like lounging around and giving myself a break. And that part is legitimate. It is okay to rest and to, have times where there's an ebb and flow, because that resting part also serves an important purpose in my life. So I think I don't feel guilty because I respect that other part of myself, as opposed to buying into this narrative that only one part of you is the good part, which, to your point earlier about like some of those social messages from people typically who really like want you to buy things from them is something that I don't think is good for any of us to index too heavily. So, thank you. So it sounds like we're in alignment. Yeah, different parts. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's see. There's a few other questions coming in. And so, Pratik, thank you very much for joining our conversation. I'm glad that you're here. And so you have an interesting perspective here. You're saying you had a breakup sometime back, that you were both wrong and right with some things or the other, but that most of the time you're thinking about the wrong things that you've done and ignoring everything else. And that it feels like you're fighting with yourself and really trying to strike a balance, which then you feel like you fail to do many times. And so maybe we can talk a little bit more about this, because I think that that's also really common to experience this tug of war between different parts of yourself when you're going through heartbreak or a loss, that there is this one part of you perhaps that is saying, let me tell you about all the ways in which you failed or made mistakes in this relationship. And then perhaps there's another part that is saying, there is more to the story, but it's confusing for you right now because you're trying to figure out which of these parts is correct. If I'm understanding your experience, and actually I'll wait for you to chime back in here, because I don't want to keep going if I'm off the mark and not really accurately understanding what it's feeling like for you. And you guys, if you're just joining us today, we're talking about how to understand different parts of yourself, particularly if you have parts of yourself that are in conflict with each other, so that we can get them back into alignment and that it feels like you are being a whole multidimensional person with a variety of goals and wants and legitimate needs. Okay, so I'm understanding you. Oh, and just one user asking, how do I find the Instagram? Yeah, track me down on Instagram. I think it's Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby on Instagram, if you would prefer to connect with us over there. But happy to visit with you on YouTube too. So we're all good. So what you're saying, going back to the breakup, so different parts of you trying to understand what is correct. And so if, again, we take a look at internal family systems, and you might want to check out this workbook. I mean, it's helpful just to sort through. What about the idea that both of these parts of you are legitimate and that they both exist to help you? So if we make the core assumption that every part of you is lovable, worthy, legitimate, and here in some way to serve you or protect you, part number one that is saying, Pratik, let me tell you about all these things that you did wrong. Another way of reframing it is that there is this part of you that is like, there are some learning opportunities here, and let's take these seriously. You know, when I work with people through heartbreak recovery, an important part of this process is actually doing a relationship audit, so to speak, where you could take a look at what happened to, in a balanced way, understand, you know, why didn't this relationship work out? And there are certainly factors that were probably out of your control that had to do with your partner. But it would be such a grave disservice to yourself and your own growth trajectory if there wasn't at least some introspection around, how could I have potentially handled some of those things better? Because if you let that in a very compassionate and productive way, it will then allow you to start developing goals or identifying gaps, like things for you to be working on personally, so that when you do have the opportunity to be in another relationship again, you will have developed new competencies that will then guide your actions and perhaps allow you to handle things in the way that you would really like to, coming from your highest and best self. So I think it's easy to dismiss that part as being like an inner critic. Oh, I can't listen to this because this makes me feel bad, as opposed to saying, no, every part of me is lovable and valuable. What are you trying to tell me that maybe I should listen to? And that is not the whole story. It is also true that this other part of you is correct and legitimate. This other part of you saying, you know what? There were some things happening here that were outside of your control and that maybe were your ex's responsibility, and that she wasn't handling those things well. Perhaps some regrettable things happened that hurt you, that felt bad for you, and that you shouldn't be treated that way in a healthy relationship. So it's there to protect you, to inform you, but also perhaps to listen to that and to be able to say, so, you know, what was going on in that situation that I was perhaps tolerating this behavior as long as I was? Was I doing a good enough job of advocating for myself with some of these things? You know, looking back even to the very beginning, especially in a dating relationship where there's some early signs that pointed to risk factors for this that maybe I overlooked and that led me into a situation that ultimately wasn't really healthy for me. because that's also very, very valuable. And again, never productive when we want to blame another person for everything that happened to us, because you're only depriving yourself of a growth opportunity when you do that. But I think it is also very important to say, this wasn't okay, and what can I also learn from that? So, the new message here is that what can be really limiting for all of us in terms of our growth and our well-being is this tendency to move into black and white thinking, like that there are parts of us that are good and virtuous and correct, and there are these other parts of us that are bad and wrong and that we need to eradicate or manage, right? The new story is that no, both sides are right. Both sides are legitimate. And how do we take wisdom from this multidimensional, multifaceted experience of self in order to understand the whole? Because there is no one truth with a capital T, not when it comes to humans. Anyway, I don't know if that was helpful to you or not in understanding what could potentially be going on in the situation. But I hope that it was. Okay, you guys. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. As I mentioned at the beginning, I need to end here at the bottom of the hour, so I can't stay too much longer, actually, on the therapy session I have to conduct. So I'm going to go ahead and go. But, thank you so much for the follow-up. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to know that perspective was helpful for you. And again, dig into this, do more work. So free resources for you, as I mentioned. Internal Family Systems Workbook. Again, I am not on commission. I'm just a fan. I worked through this myself, and I thought it was great. It's a new workbook from Dr. Richard Schwartz of Internal Family Systems fame. And you guys should know that for like the entirety of his career, what Dr. Schwartz has been doing to disseminate his ideas has been exclusively on training therapists on how to practice internal family systems, because it's a very experiential model. So it's not like informational. So it's a therapist kind of walking you through this experience. But only this past year, he released the first ever workbook that is for just the general public to be able to do some of this work on his own, because he's very interested in making these ideas just more available in the world, because I think they are so helpful, so powerful, honestly. So that's a great resource. You can check out Monday's podcast episode of Love, Happiness, and Success to learn a little bit more. I got a little free therapy from Dr. Schwartz on the show. It was kind of awesome. And then the episode before that with Thais Gibson, I thought was really helpful too, just with, again, kind of on the same line, there's parts of yourself, but there's a subconscious mind and then a conscious mind, and how to get those into alignment with each other. So anyway, free resources for you that I hope you take advantage of. All right, you guys, great to see you this week. And I will be back here next Thursday, same time, same place. Next Thursday, we're talking about the upcoming episode on something that may be experienced as controversial. It is why we should all actually stop working on our relationships if we really want them to be better. All right, we'll talk about that next time. Take care.